About hospital acquired infections. So this topic is also very important topic as far as your exam is concerned, for viva purpose also, and also for your hospital side, because you will be working in the hospital, you will go see the patients. So you need to protect yourself, need to protect the patients, right? So this is very important topic. So what all we are going to cover here is healthcare associated infections, major type of high, then prevention of high. HAI I am using for hospital acquired infections, because in my all class I will be, in the whole, throughout the lecture I will be using as high, okay? And prevention of high, standard precautions, transmission based precautions, and HICC committee. We also have a hospital infection control committee. Okay. So these are the components what we are going to talk about today. First of all is the definition. You get in your exam also this. What is the definition of hospital acquired infection? What is the definition of nosocomial infection? There's the same. Okay. Or healthcare associated infection. It's all the same. So you have to know what are the components of this definition. First of all, we have nosocomial infection. I'll just explain you first. Just put your pen down. I'll tell you what is it. First you understand, then you can write a lot. Suppose a patient comes, patient X comes to the hospital or the emergency. He is admitted day 1. Then on that day we are the doctor comes and sees and he says, okay, send this sample, send this urine sample, send this sputum sample to the lab. We want to find out what is the etiological agent of his problem or his infection or whatever. And then when he is reported, it comes to be negative, okay, on day 1. The patient is hospitalized, maybe the patient is in the ICU or he is in the ward, he is under medication, and he develops some more symptoms, like he's getting fever, or his total count, what is total count, total TC count, total WBC count is increasing, or he's having some radiological changes in his X-ray findings, okay, consolidation or infiltration is there, okay, and you are sending another repeat sample. You decide that, no, doctor says that let us see a repeat sample, let us send another blood culture sample, or another urine sample, or another sputum sample as relevant to the patient. And then from there, after 48 hours, if you are sending the sample, or maybe after beyond 48 hours, and the sample goes to the lab and you get a culture positive. Okay? So what is the inference? That the patient did not come to the hospital with the infection. Okay? So he has obtained this infection from the hospital during his stay. Okay? Is it clear? What is hospital acquired infection? So once you have understood this, now let us go to the definition. So nosocomial infections can be defined as an infection developed within a person during a stay in hospital or any other healthcare facility. Okay? Next is, infection should not be present or incubating at the time of admission. These words are very important. You have to, both of them are important. Not be present, should not be present or incubating, okay, or was in incubation at the time of admission. Next is, symptoms should appear at least 48, this is very important. They ask you in your viva. How many hours? 12 hours? How many hours? At least 48 hours. It may be 72 hours, it may be 5 days, it may be 1 month. Okay? So it is at least 48 hours. Earliest is 48 hours after admission. Clear? Also includes infections acquired in the hospital but symptoms appear after discharge. This is also important. So he stayed for 5 days in the hospital. On the 6th day he was discharged. When he went home, on the 6th day he is having symptoms and you take the culture and you see it is positive. That means when during the stay in the hospital, he got the infection. Okay. Occupational infections among staff and healthcare facility. So we all are the healthcare workers. So when you are working in the hospital, you have to follow certain measures so that you don't catch the infection, right? But it may so happen, unfortunately, or you are not careful, that you catch the infection. So that is also, this is an occupational hazard for us. There is some hazard in every occupation. So this is a occupational infection among the staff of the healthcare facility. One very common thing is like needle prick, this is there. Infection in neonates during birth while passage through the birth canal. This is also included. So all these components are included in hospital acquired infection or nosocomial infection. Clear? Okay. So you have to know this. Okay. Next is burden of high. Let us see how much high is, why we have so importance in NMC, because when we were there, when we have read microbiology, it was not given that importance. But with the emergence of a lot of multi-drug resistant organisms, this has become very much important, and NMC has put this as in our curriculum as separate chapter, and carries a lot of weightage. Why? Because of about 7% of patients in developed countries and 10% in developing countries acquire at least one high in a lifetime. Okay. Treatment of high adds to huge economic burden to the hospital. So the patient came with myocardial infarction. He did not come for any infection as such, right? Or patient came for CS, cesarean section. She is there in the hospital for 2 days, and then she catches some infection from another patient, maybe through the hands of the healthcare workers, okay? Or while insertion of a catheter, urinary catheter. So her duration of stay in the hospital increases. She has to take a lot of antibiotics, higher antibiotics, or patient may die. So the mortality rate, mortality and morbidity, you understand? So mortality rate also increases. So you can understand the intensity or the importance of this high. Treatment of high adds to huge economic burden to the hospital. Now, what are the epidemiological interactions, like host factors, the environment factors, and the agents? So we have various factors which are contributing to this high. Okay. First of all is the host factor. So extreme of ages, remember this, extreme of ages, neonates, newly born, just came out of mother's womb, okay, who are in the NICU, we call them. Sometimes they have to visit the NICU, like NICU. And also the extreme ages, like people who are aged 75, 60, 75, 80 years, 90 years, extreme of ages, right? So these two extremes, their immune system is somehow not capable of combating all the microorganisms. Okay. For a neonate, at least 6 months, till 6 months, the IgM is not to that level that it can combat another pathogen for neonates. So, and also for extreme ages, this immunity comes down. So these two extreme ages are very much vulnerable for hospital acquired infections. So immune system suppression influenced by factors such as aging, inadequate nutrition, the seriousness of existing illness, and complex diagnostic or treatment procedures. So others are like if patient is having cancer, okay. So then again the immune system is another problem there. So then immunosuppressive drugs, like patient has got a transplant, okay. So this transplant patient has to take immunosuppressants. So their immune system is suppressed. So these people are all very vulnerable patients. These are the host factors. Then the environment. The patient surrounding within the hospital includes other patients, healthcare personnel, visitors, food, drink, dust, various contaminated objects. This is the environment in the hospital, and over here is different, right? In this classroom, we have a different environment. In the hospital is different. We are having maybe in ICU, if you visit, maybe 12-bedded ICU or 15-bedded ICU. you have different patients with different type of infections. Okay, so they are bringing in the infection to the hospital. So you have to take care of those patients. So the environment is also having full of bacteria or viruses, all those pathogens with which you are dealing. So the environment. Then the healthcare personals and visitors, they are all the people who will be around the patients, right? The agents, diverse types of microorganisms, their reservoirs and the degree of their virulence. So the agents are the microorganisms, the causative agents, the various types. They may be having all MDRO, like multi-drug resistant organisms. Factors affecting high, we continue. Hospital environment as MDRO, that is multi-drug resistant organisms. Hospital organisms, diagnostic and therapeutic interventions, central line, urinary catheter, endotracheal tube. See, in the hospital, when a patient comes, he is not capable of doing a lot of things. Maybe he is not able to move due to surgery, post-surgery. Then you have to introduce a catheter. Or maybe he is not able to take his own breathing. Okay. Then you have to even put other like endotracheal tubes, extras, etc. You have to put him intubation. Central line you have to put a lot of drugs to him. Every now and then you cannot keep on pricking him, right? Morning, afternoon, evening you have to put central lines. And then endotracheal intubation has to be done. So a lot of intervention, therapeutic intervention has to be done to the patient. So these are like, they will be passing across the mucous membrane, okay, or any sterile site of the body. The blood is sterile, so it is going to pass that site. We need to cross that barriers. So there it is like introducing, chances of introducing infection to them, right? So we have to take all aseptic precautions before doing such procedures. Transfusion is another very important thing. So for transfusion, blood transfusion, donors, the transfusion of blood, sometimes it happens, the hemoglobin is very low or there is a lot of blood loss, you have to transfuse this blood. So there is blood grouping is done, and also we have to screen for different viral infections of the patient. Like HIV, they can ask you these questions. What all are the screening for blood, for what all viruses do you screen? One is HIV, HCV and HBV. 3 viruses we have to screen. Routinely it is screened. Okay? And also the abiotyping have to do those. And then, so because if this viral, if the virus is present in the blood and you are transfusing it to patient, obviously you get the virus. But when you read this HBV and HIV and HCV, you will also know more about, like, there is a term called as incubation period. Okay. So those sometimes it may be the patient is in incubation period and his test when you are doing, it is not showing positive. Okay. Because the antibodies are not to that level that it can be picked up in the test. Do you understand? So there is always chances that with blood transfusion, there may be chances are a little bit less, but there may be chances that we may get the infection. Okay? If very unfortunate. Okay? So we need to do, the blood banks usually use very good test kits methods, which so that they can pick up, they're very sensitive kits, so that they can pick up maximum of the infections. Poor hospital administration. If the hospital administration is very poor, they're very miser, they don't want to spend money behind infection control measures, they don't want to spend money behind infection control nurses' appointment or the doctors. So then they will be having, they are not sterilizing the instruments properly, they're using it. So that is also there. Administration is a very important matter here. Next is sources of high. This also they ask you, what are the different sources of high? We have endogenous sources and exogenous sources. Okay. Endogenous is majority from patient's own microbial flora. Now you understand this. Endogenous. Endo means what? Inside. Exo means outside, right? So endogenous flora means from the patient's own microbial flora. We all have microbial flora. We have GI flora, we have vaginal flora, we have skin flora, These are all commensals. They are staying in our body. is not causing any harm. Suppose you are introducing a catheter in a patient, urinary catheter, and during introducing the urinary catheter, you are a female patient and you are not taking proper aseptic methods, not sterilizing your hand properly, this, that. So then what happens is, there may be chances that because from the own patient's microbial flora, you may introduce that inside the patient, in the urinary tract. So that goes inside, and then you are causing the source of infection is during the catheter insertion. It happens, or you are not taking proper care while the patient is having the catheter. That is also there. So endogenous flora, and then exogenous sources like environmental sources, medical equipments, contamination from blood, body fluids, and also excretions. So exogenous sources are very important, because when the patient is there in the hospital, lot of infections can happen from outside also. Lot of doctor's hands or healthcare workers' hands, or it may be from the instruments which you are introducing inside during intubation or during bronchoscopy. A lot of can happen. Then healthcare workers, potential carriers like MRSA. This is very important. MRSA is methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus. You have to know this bacteria. Okay, this is resistant to the methicillin group of drugs. So this is again healthcare workers can be carriers. Write it down. Carriers. Healthcare workers can be carriers. So we have to, carrier means what? The nurse or doctor, she is carrying the bacteria, but she is not infected. Okay. So we have to take swabs. Sometimes we have to do some. Suppose a patient has got MRSA, or there is an outbreak of MRSA in the ward. Then what you have to do is we have to do surveillance. In that we have to see whoever is in contact with the patients, whether they are carrying the MRSA, whether they are carriers. Okay, we have to take nasal swabs and do culture and see. So all those activities we have to see, so that, and then maybe what we will do is we have to give, usually the nurse or the doctor has to go on leave, has to take a treatment, all those things has to be done, activities. Then other patients of the hospital, source of infection. Other patients, very important. One patient is lying here, usually we keep a distance of 3 feet from 2 beds, From 2 beds you have to have a distance of 3 feet. So from one patient, another patient, nurse is taking care. If one nurse is taking care of both the patients, they have to do. You cannot have one nurse for one patient, right? So, and she is not washing her hands properly. So maybe that patient is a source of infection for the other one. This is called cross-contamination of the patients, cross-infections. Okay? Next is, this is also important, very important. What are the microorganisms? What are the major common agents of high, or the microorganisms which are responsible for high? Okay? So we'll ask you, you have to remember and you have to say. So very easy way of remembering is just this word, ESKAP, escape. If you remember this, okay, so you can write it down, like memorize it, this is the word. So rest of the bacteria name you have to know, okay. So now for E we have Enterococcus faecium, okay. This is a bacteria which is also in our in our GI tract. It is usually a commensal in our GI flora. Okay. Enterococcus faecium. We also get in urinary tract infection patients. Enterococcus species, faecium. Then we have fecalis. Okay, to get it. So these are the common. The bacteria is supposed to. These bacteria are supposed to stay in the GI tract. They are not supposed to stay in the urinary tract, right? But if it somehow manages to go in the urinary tract by the doctors or the nurses, where they're doing the interventions like putting a urinary catheter, or when a person or any person or patient is not cleaning properly, then so it may cause infection as a UTI, urinary tract infection. So we will not forget, right? Then is Staphylococcus aureus, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Acinetobacter baumannii. Klebsiella pneumoniae is gram negative, Acinetobacter is gram negative, Staphylococcus aureus is gram positive. You have seen this Staphylococcus, right? Have you seen? Practical class. Bunches, clusters, you have seen, right? Enterococcus faecium is also gram positive. Okay. And this we have here Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So SKP is Enterobacter species. So this bacteria you can, from this you can easily write. So you have to know these bacteria. Okay. They will ask you in exam. Next is other E. coli. We have many E. coli, and SARS-CoV-2 you already know. It was already there. And then Mycobacterium tuberculosis. This is another bacilli which is very much vulnerable. If you have a patient of Mycobacterium tuberculosis, you have to isolate him in the hospital. Okay? Or else, because from his aerosol there is, he can infect others, the nurses, doctors, patients. Then we have Candida albicans. This is a yeast. Clostridium difficile, diarrhea. Usually, this is also can be high. Okay, Clostridium difficile, remember. And then these viruses, HIV, okay, that is through blood. Remember these three. These three are through blood and body fluids. Which viruses are transmitted through blood and body fluids? I will ask in a viva. Very pet question. ये तीनों आना चाहिए. HIV, HCV, HBV. ठीक है ना? Okay. Hepatitis B virus, Hepatitis C virus, and Hepatitis HIV. These are through blood route or body fluids. Okay. Through needle prick also. Chances very less, but needle prick. That is in the hospitals. So this chart is clear for all of you. Now mode of transmission. So we saw the organism. What all we saw? We saw the organisms. We saw the sources of high, then factors affecting high, then what are the agents, and then burden, and then we saw the definition. Till now we learned those, right? Okay. Now let us go to mode of transmission. You have a next class, we have another class, not now, means next week. Means after this class we have another class where these will be dealt in details. Okay. So, but here you should know a little bit about it. So, how in the hospital there are chances of infection of high, how transmission of high by these four transmission modes. Okay. Number one is SCOTY. So, if you say it is, see the maximum is SCOTY, 33%. I have used the abbreviations because in hospital they use the abbreviations also. But you have to know the full form. When you write in your paper, you have to write the full forms. Okay. But you have to know they don't use catheter associated urinary tract infection like that. So you will be telling COTY. Okay. But you have to know that this catheter associated urinary tract infection. Okay. Is it clear? So that you have to write. You should write CAUT as catheter associated urinary tract infection. In bracket you can write COTY for you guys. Okay. Okay. So this is most common nosocomial infection is UTI. Okay. So this is also a question, MCQ question. Which is the most common nosocomial infection? Is urinary tract infection. Okay. Catheter associated urinary tract infection. Okay. Okay. So this much I told you, little bit story about like how catheter can introduce, the bacterial flora of the own patient's flora also, or from the hands of the patient, this nurses, doctors, healthcare workers, right? Okay. And not only introduce, while introducing, even while taking care, because this catheter remains for a while, for some time, right? So during that duration also this catheter care has to be given by the nurses properly. Next is CLABSI, CLABSI, central line associated bloodstream infection. Okay, central line associated bloodstream infection. Okay. So we put central lines In the ICU, almost every patient will have a central line. Okay, so that we can put for his administration of his medications. Very often you have to put injectable IV drugs. You have to use, you know. So those CLAVSI, that is about 13%. Most common catheter-related bloodstream infection is coagulase negative staphylococcus. This is another bacteria which is also in the own skin flora, it remains. So that also can cause infection. So that is another MCQ question, I put it there. Then VAP, we have ventilator associated pneumonia. You know, patients sometimes they have to be put on ventilator, okay, when they cannot do their own breathing, then you have to put on ventilator. This is a support to the patient. So that can cause also pneumonia to the patient. We get lot of patients of VAP patients. Then is SSI, that is surgical site infection. Okay, so surgical site infection, a patient had this cesarean section, okay, and she went home maybe after 2 days usually, and on the 4th day she has developed, you know, pus from that incision site. That incision site has become red, you know, and she's having some pain also there. So she has to follow up with the doctor, and we have to take a culture of that pus, see if it is growth is there. That means it is the surgical site infection, right? SSI. Then you have to investigate what was the cause of this infection. Okay, we have this whole team of people who will be investigating why it has happened, because we don't want this to happen again, right? So we have to prevent that. So that is all we wanted to say. These 4 you have to remember, okay? Next. So I have given you some scenarios here to make you understand how these infections happens in the hospital, okay, of high, how this happens. First of all, we have scenario 1 is CAUTI, catheter associated urinary tract infection. Patient with symptoms, patient profile, an elderly male patient who has had a indwelling urinary catheter for 5 days. So he was having a catheter for 5 days. On admission, he had no urinary symptoms and urine culture was negative. Signs and symptoms, he developed a fever off and on and complaints of suprapubic tenderness. Suprapubic, understand? Over the pubic area where the bladder is there, right? So usually urinary tract infection, one sign is when you elicit this sign, you understand signs and symptoms? Signs is elicited by the doctors, symptoms the patient will tell you, right? He is having. So when you elicit this sign, you just put the hand over this, the suprapubic area and he says, oh wow, he's getting pain. So that is what suprapubic tenderness. He is telling I am having pain and he is eliciting pain. So, and he is in fever also. That means there is some, you will understand that, okay, there may be some infection there, right? So that is how you investigate. Then you ask for urine culture and he gets a colony count of more than 10⁵. This is significant bacteriuria, okay? Means there is infection of E. coli on the 4th day of the admission, okay? So diagnosis, this patient meets the criteria for, 48 hours we had told, after admission. Initial urine, when you took the culture, there was negative, but 48 hours ke baad ye hua hai iska incident. And then, so we have to, he is having a catheter, so it is catheter associated urinary tract infection because he has an indwelling catheter and during the duration requirement is met and he has fever and all other signs and symptoms along with the positive urine culture. Get it? This is one scenario I wanted to make you understand where now we stamp this patient as a catheter associated urinary tract infection. This is, then we have to do RCA, we say RC and kappa, like root cause analysis of any incident that is happening like this. We have to do the root cause analysis. We have to find out what was the wrong with individually, with the nurses, with the doctors, with the patient, what went, where we went wrong, so that we can, and kappa is corrective action. What corrective actions we can take, okay? Next is risk of urinary tract infection, direct access for bacteria. The catheter acts as a bridge for, these are the reasons why this catheter, through the catheter, how this bacteria can enter inside. I have just enumerated some risks. Sometimes they ask this also. Direct access for bacteria, compromised defenses or biofilm formation, contamination points and increased risk with duration. So the catheter acts as a bridge for bacteria from the skin or other sources to get directly into the bladder, which is normally a sterile environment, which I already told you, right? Next is compromised defenses. The presence of the catheter physically disrupts the bladder's natural defenses. This is a foreign body after all, right? So it can be easily a nidus for infection and can cause inflammation and mechanical damage to the urinary tract lining. You can just write this down. Usually these are not in a book, so I found this is very valuable. Biofilm formation is bacteria can attach to the catheter and form a protective layer called as biofilm. Some bacteria have got that, remember in the first class I told you slime layer and biofilm. Do you remember this? So how it becomes difficult for us to treat these patients because they go and attach with this prosthetic devices or the catheters. So biofilm is also a factor here. So this biofilm shields them from the body's immune response and antibiotics, making them much harder to eliminate. Contamination points, bacteria can enter the bladder through the catheter's inner lumen or travel up the outside of the catheter. Increased risk with duration. The longer a catheter is in place, the higher the risk of infection becomes. Okay. So these are how the catheter is, urinary tract infection is so common, like these are the few reasons. So usually we put 7 to 10 days one catheter you can put, and if you want to extend his catheter, sometimes patients are there for so long, right? So then you have to again take out that catheter and then you have to introduce a new catheter. Silicone catheters are better, they say these days, because it causes less infection, urinary tract infections, and catheter care is a very important component which the nursing staff has to do properly so that they don't get infection. Okay. Scenario 2, it is a little bit hazy. Okay, here it is CLABSI. I will read it out. CLABSI is central line associated bloodstream infection. So this patient with 75 years old is admitted to the intensive care unit for severe pneumonia. He was admitted for pneumonia. Medical device. On day 2 of his admission, a central venous catheter is placed in his internal jugular vein to administer IV medication and fluids. Okay, you know the internal jugular vein. So there he has a central venous catheter was introduced to produce for his administration of medication. When did you put? On second day. The central line insertion proceeds without immediate complication, and for several days John's condition remains stable. For few days he was fine, but then on day 5 nurse notes a new onset unexplained fever. He is having fever, and he also appears more lethargic and confused than he was the previous day. Okay. Day 6, despite a dose of acetaminophen, that is antipyretic, John's fever persists, his blood pressure begins to drop and his heart rate increases. The skin around his central line insertion site appears slightly red and swollen. So around that site of insertion is also, that is swollen and red. So you have to put your suspicion there can be an infection around that catheter site. So alarmed by the signs of worsening sepsis, because in the central line. So sepsis is what? Infection in the blood stream, in the blood, right? Sepsis. The care team removes the central line. They remove it because they want to take the nidus out, this particular central line, and sends the catheter for culture. It goes for culture. Simultaneously, they draw 2 sets of blood culture from a peripheral vein. From the peripheral vein, they drew drops of blood culture. The culture results later confirm the presence of Staphylococcus aureus. Okay, so that's how we have come to the conclusion that is having a CLABSI. Because of the blood culture identifies a pathogen, there is no other known source of infection, and the patient had a central line in place within 48 hours of symptoms. Okay. John is diagnosed with a CLABSI. He is immediately started on broad spectrum antibiotics, and his course of treatment is extended. See how This bacteria has caused his longer stay in the hospital. Now he has to spend a lot of money, and maybe this, if he is very much like debilitated or having other co-infections like diabetes mellitus and other infections, maybe he's succumbed to that and he dies, may happen. Like, so these days many patients die due to high, hospital acquired infection. So that is not okay. We should not, remember when you took the oath, "Thy do no harm," you should not do any harm to the patient. So you have to be very careful about while treating a patient. Okay, during insertion, several factors was there. Failure to, let us see what can be the factors, possible factors. What are saying? Root cause analysis. The failure to perform adequate hand hygiene, very important. You should start having this habit of washing hands properly, because you may be the reason for death of a person. Can you imagine? You don't want to happen that, right? So that is what. Failure to perform adequate hand hygiene, breaks in sterile technique during insertion. While insertion, there must be some contamination, is not there the chances. Improper skin penetration, such as not using an alcohol-based chlorhexidine solution. Usually when you are doing such insertion, like putting inside anything, you have to first make that place sterile, right? So maybe that was compromised. Selection of the femoral vein for insertion, which has a higher infection rate than other sites. During maintenance, poor hand hygiene before accessing the catheter hubs, because the patient is on catheter for so many days. Even during the maintenance, every day the nurse will come and do the catheter care, During that process also it may be some gap. Failure to scrub the access port with the antiseptic, then infrequent or improper dressing changes, allowing the central line to remain in place longer than necessary. This is very important. The earlier the better to remove. The doctor should assess कि अभी catheter हम remove कर सकते हैं. The earlier the catheter goes out is better. I know many patients who has persistent or chronic urinary tract infection, and they can get never rid of the infection. It's so unfortunate. So whenever you will do, they are taking medications, maybe 10 days they are fine, but again they will come with a lot of pustules, again bacteria. So repeated, there is chronic. It's like gone, you cannot treat them. ऐसा भी होता है, ऐसे भी patients हैं. So it's so bad. Once a strain comes, which is MDRO strain, usually this Klebsiella pneumoniae MDRO is like really problem these days. It's causing a lot of problems. So bundle care, sometimes they have these prevention strategies are what we have bundled this. Many institutions use a insertion bundle. You can write this down. Insertion bundle or maintenance bundle. Like they have made a bundle of steps what to be taken, followed, so that during the care. Okay. A set of evidence-based practices that when implemented together reduce the CLABSI rates. Okay. Then education and training, very important, and it is an ongoing process. Abhi hospital staff, you may have 100, maybe 5 more staff has joined, so you have to train them again. And also the existing staff also you have to keep on training. Ongoing training has to be given. All healthcare personnel involved in central line care must be receiving training or proper insertion and maintenance protocols. Checklist has to be there. In very good hospitals, you always have some checklist. Morning checklist for care of catheters, urinary catheters. Checklist is there. Whatever you have done, you have to just tick, 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 tick. Okay, you have done this. So then you know that nothing is missed. Daily assessment, a daily review of the central lines necessity is critical. Removing the line as soon as possible is no longer needed, significantly reduces infection. Okay. Now we have another case of VAP, ventilator associated pneumonia. So let us see this case. This is 67 years old male, history of stroke, who is in the intensive care unit ICU and requires a ventilator to breathe due to respiratory failure. Okay. And then what happens? Initial status, he has been on a ventilator for 3 days, 72 hours. Initially his oxygen level levels are improving and he is stable. On day 4 of ventilation, he develops restlessness and there is increase in temperature. So is about 38.6 degrees Celsius. His heart rate is elevated and his respiratory therapist notes an increase in the amount of thick yellow secretion coming from his breathing tube and increased oxygen requirement. So this secretion is an indication. Secretion usually happens, but it is very thick and he is having high raised temperature. His body, he is having fever now. So those things are indicative that we should send a sample now. We should send a sample. So what? If you check, and also chest X-ray has to be done to see whether there is changes, infiltration is there or not. So cloudy patches or infiltrates are there. Sample of the secretion which has been sent is been seen as Pseudomonas aeruginosa, a common hospital acquired pathogen. You know this escape pathogen, Pseudomonas aeruginosa is there. So it is again a case of VAP. We have to say it is a VAP. Outcome: the medical team starts prompt treatment with broad spectrum antibiotics to combat this, and also the patient taken conditions remain serious, but early diagnosis and treatment are key to improving his outcome and potentially reducing the length of his hospital stay. So very important is like you have to first recognize that this patient is having VAP, this patient is having COTY. Then only you can start higher antibiotics or broad spectrum antibiotics, you understand? So as a doctor, now you may think that this is only for passing your exam, but these are the most challenging things for you, when you are treating a patient. I don't know what is going to happen after 5 years or 6 years, because day by day, all those, you saw yesterday also we had classes, all those bacteria have become so resistant, so difficult to treat them. So these sort of patients, usually the report, Pseudomonas aeruginosa, Acinetobacter baumannii, you will get a report where all the drugs are resistant, all the antibiotics are resistant. You understand? These are MDROs, Klebsiellas, and how to treat them? So difficult, challenging for the doctors. Next is SSI, surgical site infection. So scenario, what is this? A patient who has CS section 12 days ago reports pus coming from their surgical wound along with fever, nausea and weakness. Examination: the wound appears red and moist with a small amount of pus. Outcome: the patient is hospitalized for wound cleaning and receives a course of intravenous and oral antibiotics to treat the surgical. What I told you, like SSI for a surgeon is not okay. You understand? The surgeon, how good he is from his outcome, with how many successful surgeries he has done, right? So if his patient is landing up with a SSI, so it is not okay for him. We have to investigate what is going wrong, whether it was sterilization was done properly or the dressing was done properly, because you want to go home back happy with after a surgery, right? So now this is another very important part, prevention of high. Prevention of high. So how to prevent? They are asking standard precautions. You will get short notes. What is standard precautions? You will be using these words, standard precautions. Okay. Standard precaution to be followed by all individuals. This word is important, by all. By all individuals, whether they appear infectious or symptomatic or not, all specimens, if they appear infectious or not, all needles and sharps. So for all patients, you have to follow standard precautions, for all. They look they look healthy, they look ill, they look infectious or whatever. Standard. There are standard protocols we say for all. Okay. So universal, earlier this was the word used, universal precautions. Then we get a short note on universal precaution also. The same meaning. But nowadays we don't use universal precaution, we use standard precaution. But you have to know because for this. And transmission based precautions. So we have two. One is standard precautions, standard for any XYZ patient we use. Another is depending on the mode of transmission. That is another added. So two things you have to use. One is standard, one is transmission based precautions for all high patients. All patients. In fact, not only high, for all patients. Okay. And standard, this transmission based precaution is for high patients who are having high. Next is standard precautions. What you have? List of things. Hand hygiene for all patients. Hand hygiene at least, okay. Hand hygiene will have a separate class altogether for you. Okay. And this is very important for practical, theoretical, many short questions, vivas, this, that, they will come. Okay? So these are, and BMWs, you have a separate class. Hand hygiene, we can either use hand wash, like washing hands, or hand rub. Hand rub. But both have got some different purpose. Suppose your hands are soiled, like, with blood, dirt, whatever. You have to obviously wash your hands. You cannot do with hand rub, right? But suppose you are in a round in a hospital where you have 12 patients. Now you have entered the ward and now you have to see round of 12 patients. So there, in between each patients, you can use the hand rub. So there are rationality you have to find out. If you are doing any procedure, you have to hand wash. If you are doing surgery, you have to hand wash. Those are the things. So hand hygiene, at least 40 to 60 seconds. This is important. Okay. Hand, for this time, if this is long, you have to do it. Hands are soiled before and after eating. These are the time you have to do. After toilet, before and after shift of duty. Okay? 10 steps. Why I have written this? Because these are important. They'll ask you in MCQs. 9 steps, 8 steps. Even these are important. 10 steps. Okay? Timing is important. Next is hand rub to be used 5 moments. Remember this. By WHO, they say 5 moments. Before touching patient. Cup hand rub. Before touching patient. After touching patient. Before aseptic procedure. After aseptic procedure. After touching patient. After touching patient surroundings. So, there are 5 moments. Steps are 1 to 7. Here you have 7 steps. Only 3 steps are less. For hand washing, you have 3 more steps. Okay. You have at home after you are taught here. Okay. Next is personal protective equipments. What we are doing, these are standard precautions. Personal protective equipments, again, this will also be taken to you by our teachers. This is like, includes a lot of things: gown, mask, goggles, cap, then you have these shoe covers, So these are all the personal protective PPEs, we call PPEs. Biomedical waste segregation and treatment. This is also separately will be taught to you. You have to know all this. Biomedical segregation, where to put what, color coded bins, biohazards, So those things you have to know. Spillage cleaning. If there is a spill, how to treat it. Then disinfection of patient care items. The patient care items, there are a lot of like bed pens are there, many things are there which you have to again reuse them. How to disinfect them. Then environmental cleaning, how to do the environmental cleaning. And then sharp treatment, the sharps like needle, those needles which you are discarding, how they are treated. Okay. Respiratory hygiene, or etiquettes, all this. So these are the standard precautions. Then transmission based precautions. In addition to standard precautions, now we have transmission based precautions. These are three modes of transmission usually. From one patient to another patient, you may get the infection. So according to that, we have to take the precautions. One is contact precaution. Next is droplet precaution, and third is airborne precautions. Okay. So you have to understand these 3. Contact, droplet and airborne. Transmission based precautions. Okay. Now contact, by the word you understand contact? Touch होने से infection हो सकता है. Understand? So that is contact precaution. So when definitive or suspected evidence of spread can happen by direct or indirect contact during care. Okay. So these are all these organisms which can happen, we put it under contact precaution. So this can either you have like, how will you know a patient is coming to you? How will you know I have to put him in contact precaution or not? First of all, patient comes in the emergency, you have to start the standard precautions, all. Okay. And then what happens is, you will have some clinical suspicion. मान लो chicken pox है patient को. You know the lesions of chicken pox. देखने से पता चलता है. So you have some intuitions or clinical findings or a differential diagnosis. This is a suspected patients of chicken pox. So you know. So this patient has to go for isolation and contact precaution. Am I clear? contact precaution, because chicken pox is a very vulnerable viral disease, because you must be having some, also cases in your house where somebody had chicken pox, then the whole family has chicken pox, right? Am I right? So we have to follow contact precautions during this. We have to put the patient in isolation. He has to go in a hospital. There are isolation rooms. They has to be in the isolation. And we'll see what are the criteria for isolation also. Okay. And all sorts of gown, gloves, PPE has to be followed. Everything. All those what you say. So these are the bacteria and viruses that I have tried to put here. MRSA, you know this now. Methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, VRE, vancomycin resistant Enterococcus. Then we have MDR Acinetobacter, multi-drug resistant, conjunctivitis. Many conjunctivitis are also, contagious. Then we have viral conjunctivitis. Then we have agents, adenovirus, chlamydia, some skin infections, diarrhea like rotavirus, cholera. And then we have HAV and HEV also. So then we have infection control measures. Now you have to know this. Like once you have isolated the patient, also you have to take some precautions. What you have to do? Over the standard precautions, we have more added. Hand hygiene, PPE, equipments, and then patient placement, isolation room, what I told you. 3 feet distance between beds. If you are cohorting patients, like if you have a case of, this VRE and you have 2 VREs, vancomycin resistant Enterococcus, you have 3 VRE patients in a ward. So what you can do is you cohort them, because you don't have the luxury of so many isolation rooms maybe. So you can put these 3 patients together, okay, and then you can take care. In that case, you have to keep the distance, 3 feet distance from each one, and you have to put one nurse, one-to-one nursing care is also important. So this is all which we do. Transfer of patients. Suppose these patients are transferring, they have to go to the radiology department for their maybe X-ray, maybe they have to do sonography or whatever. While transferring the patients also, you have to take care so that it doesn't spread. And then disinfection of the rooms. Once the patient goes away, he is discharged, the whole room has to be fumigated properly, cleaned properly, deep cleanings, because you want to keep that room ready for the next patient. So this. Now is droplet precautions. Droplets are more than 5 μm larger particles due to coughing, sneezing, talking. Okay. Difference between droplet and aerosol or airborne precaution is what? Less than 5 μm droplets. Okay. And that is more than 5 μm. This is the only difference. Okay. These are bigger particles when you are sneezing, coughing the patient. So these are. So we have diphtheria, pneumonia by H. influenzae. These are all like more respiratory related bacteria and viruses. Okay. And then we have Neisseria meningitidis, pertussis, pneumonic plague, streptococcal pharyngitis, SARS-CoV-2, viral and hemorrhagic fever. So these are all transmitted through, droplets when you are coughing, sneezing and all. Infection control measures, what you have, obviously you have to put a mask. You have to rationalize. इसमें mask लगाना पड़ेगा. What is it? Hand hygiene, PPE, N95 mask. You know this N95? We used to use during the COVID. So this is N95. Then goggles, because you are doing any procedure in that patient, you have to put goggles. Then patient should wear surgical mask all the time. Okay? Patient should wear surgical mask all the time. Patient placement in isolation room again, and 3 feet distance or in cohort. Transfer of patients, disinfection of rooms. Okay? The same thing for that also. Some things are only added here, where the patient has to wear a mask. Here, airborne precautions less than 5 μm. Spread by respiratory aerosols, Mycobacterium tuberculosis. If you have a patient of Mycobacterium tuberculosis in your hospital, you have to put a mask on him. You have to put a mask on him, because you don't want the infection when you are taking care. So like that. Mycobacterium tuberculosis or measles or chickenpox, zoster, and Bacillus anthracis, pulmonary aspergillosis. This is aerosol, AGP I put for aerosol generating procedures. there are certain procedures which the doctor does. It produces some aerosols, you know. So what are these? Endotracheal intubation, open respiratory and airway suctioning, tracheostomy care, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and sputum induction or bronchoscopy. So when you are looking inside the bronchus, you understand. So you may even, or you are taking a bronchoalveolar lavage, you know, you may produce some aerosols. So you have those face shields, you know, you have to wear a mask over that, you have to wear a face shield and then do the procedure. So these are aerosol generating procedures, and the patient is infectious. You can understand. You don't want to infect yourself. You have to do all this. You have to take the precautions. Isolate patient in negative pressure room, use of N95 respirator. Okay, these sort of patients where even a small droplet can also infect you. So you have to take all those utmost care. You have to put them in a negative pressure room. I'll tell you what is this. Okay, and N95 mask or respirators. So this is a negative pressure room. So they have a lower pressure inside, preventing air from flowing out. So you see, this is the corridor. Okay, this is the negative pressure isolation room. So in an isolation room, there is always a requirement of an anteroom. Anteroom means when you are entering this room, you require one other room before this room. Ante means before, right? So before this room, you need this room. This is the room where you will have a hand wash facility, donning and doffing facility. Donning means what? Wearing gloves, gown, PPE wearing is donning. Removing is doffing. Okay. So we have to wear when you are coming, the doctor is coming or you are coming, entering this room to see a patient who is lying down here, he is having chicken pox. Imagine like that. So you enter like this. The airflow is from here to here. Okay. It will never be from this place to this place. You understand? Because he is having the infection, we don't want the infection to travel from here to here. Is it clear? So it is a one-way flow. So that is the reason the airflow is from this direction to this direction. So this is a corridor. Doctor, nurse, everybody, whoever comes, first comes in the anteroom. He has to wash his hands, wear this PPE, wear mask and everything, and then enter the room. Take care of the patient. Okay, and then he has to leave the room. Okay. So while leaving also, he has to wash his hands and he has to take off his PPE there and then come out safe. Okay. So this is the bathroom for the patient, single bathroom, because he is infectious, he cannot use a common toilet. So this is a common, negative pressure scenario which is here, and this room also has an exhaust or a HEPA filters. Okay. Is it clear, everybody? So now you know what is, if anyone asks you what is a negative pressure room, you will know. Okay? Next, infection control measures, PPE, HCW to wear, N95 mask, patient to be placed in airborne infection isolation room, and adequate ventilation, UV irradiation facility, filtration of HEPA by the HEPA filter or exhaust fans, which I told you already. Okay, negative pressure ventilation, visitor and staff restricted and wear PPE. For visitors, you have to convince, you have to counsel the patient party. We don't want to catch that infection. So better you stay outside. Usually you have a glass, see-through, so you can see from outside. So that is what. And if at all the visitor is to go there inside, then he has to wear all the PPE and everything. Next is infection control measures, PPE, patient placement, ventilation, UV germicidal radiation, filtration, transfer of patient, respiratory hygiene and visitors and staff. Now we come to the hospital infection control committee. So all this job has to be under a particular little bit organized, right? Now you can understand there's so much work behind this. How to identify, whom to report, what measures to be taken, like individual doctors cannot do that. So there should be a committee for doing all this job, and they will be designating the job to individual people, right? So that is called the Hospital Infection Control Committee. Okay. So HICC committee includes wide representative from relevant departments. They will have this committee will have members from different departments, surgical department, pediatrics, all the departments. Okay. Now, and department and chairperson is usually the medical superintendent is the chairperson, and secretary is HOD of microbiology. because it's all related to the microbiology. So this is actually another part or component of our microbiology department. Okay. So functions of the HICC is high surveillance. You know, the surveillance I spoke about, MRSA, I was telling you about, or there is any outbreak of some Klebsiella in a newborn unit of a NICU, you have to first do surveillance and find out what is the cause, how can you prevent it. Surveillance activity is very important. And key parameters are also COTI, CLEPSI, VAP and SSI. These are the parameters which you have to find. Antimicrobial stewardship program, yesterday they were talking about this, because we also have a control about what antimicrobials are used in the hospital. You cannot keep on using, one doctor XYZ cannot use any antibiotics on his own, like higher antibiotics, and cause resistance. Okay. So that is also there. Policy making, SOP making. SOP means what? Standard operative procedures. For everything we have a standard operative procedure. So that has to be there, so that these people will make. And then education or training to the people. Staff health and vaccination, reviews, HICC meeting. Okay. So staff health and vaccination. Are you already in the process of taking the vaccines? Which vaccine? Hepatitis B virus vaccine. I already told you. So the staff has to take the vaccines. So that also is maintained by this. Okay. Reviews and HICC meetings. Responsibilities of the infection control team. So we have an infection control committee and we also have an infection control team. Committee is a bigger body. Team is a small body who will go in the hospital and take rounds. See everything is fine, where there is an outbreak or the surveillance activity is going on properly or not. If there is, if the autoclave is working or not properly, you know. So these things. Infection control officer and infection control nurse, integral part. We have different trained nurses for that. They are called infection control nurse. Providing comprehensive education and ongoing training programs, crafting, updating and distributing infection preventive policies, and conducting regular hygiene, surveillance and performing rounds and audits, performing clinical audits to ensure compliance and improve practices. Okay. So these audits, you know, even hand hygiene or hand wash audits are also there. So if you are working in a good hospital, you will not know that somebody is watching you. The infection control nurse is watching you. You will not be intimated whether you are washing your hands properly or not. And those will be noted down. At the end of the month, they have to, this committee sits together for a meeting, and there is a presentation by the infection control officer and nurse to tell that this many people, this percentage of people, doctors are washing their hands. This percentage of nurses are washing their hands in my hospital. This is the compliance percentage wise. Do you understand? Or this much percentage is our COTI rate in our hospital. So this many patients has become VAP. So this is the committee duty. And that's how they have to take the corrective action of the hospital. Less high in a hospital, that's very good, right? We don't want any hospital-acquired infections. Extreme diligence is essential when managing the following areas. Housekeeping operations, very important. We as doctors, we think that we are at the top, but the person who is at the bottom, the housekeeping people, they are very equally important. If they are not cleaning properly, then you cannot function properly, right? Housekeeping, nutritional and meal services, linen handling and laundry process. Very important is the linen and laundry. See, important in the hospital, every part is important. If the linen is not cleaned properly, it may even again carry the infection, right? So that is also important. And Central Sterile Supply Department, CSSD, the most heart of the hospital, which you already know by now. You know, right? Okay. Patient nursing care, proper waste management. Nurses are very important, vital role. Proper waste management, implementation of antibiotic protocols and overall hygiene and sanitation standards. Okay. So these are the 5 foundations for infection prevention. Implementing isolation and protective barriers, thorough cleaning and sterilization of medical tools, responsible and cautious administration of antibiotics, consistent and effective hand hygiene practices, maintaining a sanitized and safe environment. Okay. These are the 5 pillars we say. Okay. So almost done. So this is the hospital. Just imagine. I wanted to put this. So in a hospital, you can imagine it is having all those virus, bacteria, fungi, parasites, everything is there, right? So we have to protect ourselves, we have to keep ourselves free from all this, protect our patients also, right? Protect the environment. Okay. 7 strategies to prevent healthcare associated infections. This is the last slide. So here you see the outermost one, hand hygiene. सबसे important hand hygiene. Next is environmental hygiene, screening and cohorting patients, surveillance, antibiotic stewardship and following guidelines, and safety culture. So thank you very much. We are done here.